And we might talk about car movies tonight. We might talk about some New Hampshire laws. We could talk about American racing history. We could talk about Barrett Jackson. I'm really not sure. It's another episode of No Driving Gloves. And if my script would show up. Yes, it's another episode of No Driving Gloves. It's a gloves off discussion of the automotive hobby. I'm happy tonight. Here, no topic is off limits and no conversation is predictable. Whether it's classic cars, modern machines, or the quirks of car culture, we dive in headfirst, unfiltered, and unapologetic. You never know what you'll hear or where the ride is going to take us. If you want to join in on the fun, be a guest on the show, drop us a line before we shift gears to a Patreon exclusive model where you're going to have to pay to be a guest. Well, be a Patreon member. That's what that means. But let's buckle up, hit the road, and it's No Driving Gloves. Have you guys been watching Barrett Jackson at all this week, or other than the big news highlights of things falling from the sky?
Not a bit, and it's been glorious. This is the first Scottsdale in several years that I haven't had to pay attention.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it was that time of year. Nope, been watching.
I knew it only because my former colleague sent me a note about the 55 Chevy falling off the lift, and because my phone memories brought up past Scottsdale photos. So, but even then, Barrett Jackson is not usually much my scene. It's even from the typical Scottsdale auction, though, although Barrett Jackson's the big one, like it's not really. Nothing's like Barrett Jackson.
Well, it's gotten so confusing because Barrett Jackson used to be the big boy in the room, the one that everybody talked about in January. And it still is. And Craig still gets some fabulous automobiles and everything rolls through at no reserve. But I don't know. It seems that Dana Meekum, we talked about last week, is overshadowing a little bit. He's bringing in some great cars. He's bringing in a diverse selection of cars, all kinds of price ranges. And what does his auction run now? 10 days or something? Really? And it's like his ends on Sunday and Craig starts his on Monday. So you've got to get on the plane in Kissimmee and fly on out to Scottsdale. And I'm not even sure what's happening with the accompanying auctions this weekend.
Well, I think it's interesting too that, I wonder how much it's hurting each auction house, because it's a bit like what's going on in Florida over the last few years around the concours. Of course, Amelia Island and the whole Haggerty situation there, and then RM Auctions starting up their concours back to back. And yes, they're moving it around this year to set it up differently, but and I get business is business, but I really don't understand what I see as a bit of pettiness in the auction and concours world with this battle to back ourselves right up to each other to try to hurt the other one. Like, I don't think it does the hobby, the industry, any of it any good. I don't know why we feel like this is a necessary way to run business.
I've never had the impression those companies were doing that by any means. I mean, I think if you talk to the Meekum folks, what they would tell you is that Florida is a totally different region than Arizona, and that they could probably have it right on top of Barrett Jackson. And except for losing some of the national audience, they're going to have exactly the same event, because what you have in both places is a huge number of moneyed up retirees who are going to be the bread and butter car people. I mean, yes, Meekum's adding cool high end stuff year after year. I mean, to me, it started when they got the Bullet Mustang, right?
But I mean, Barrett Jackson, drew Ron Pratt and I can't think of his name from the Discovery Channel. I mean, they'd fly out from Pennsylvania to go to Arizona. And then you've got Jerry Seinfeld consigning his Porsche 917 to Meekum in Florida. Now, I believe that car Jerry keeps in California, not in New England. So he's transporting cars across the country. And then you got to wonder how much of it is, I want to say, show, because I'm drawing a blank on his name all of a sudden. Bruce Canepa, or Canepa, sorry, Bruce. He valued Seinfeld's 917 at $25 million. And I heard on another podcast, Seinfeld bought that car 25 years ago, roughly, for 1.2. And the car bid to 25 and it still didn't sell. So was that Meekum paying Seinfeld a couple of bucks to bring the car out there? Because you know damn well if Seinfeld had a reserve on it at 27.5 or even 28 million, Meekum would have sold it and given Seinfeld the difference just so they could say they sold that car. Mm-hmm. So was Seinfeld crazy, or was it, hey, Jerry, we'll give you $1 million or $500,000 to bring that car and consign it. And if that's the case, then Derek might be right that these are competitive auctions. I mean, Kissimmee, Florida, maybe he was a week early, but with the Daytona 24 hours and that, I would think there would be some people worldwide in Kissimmee last Saturday that would have the money to buy that car.
Sure. I think go ahead, Dave.
Well, I think for the truly top end cars, that you aren't limited to having a buyer physically there, because both of those operations are fully capable of taking internet and telephone bids, and there are proxy bidders that go to these things. I mean, heck, if you're a rich enough guy, you go only if you want the ambiance. What you do is you send your garage guy or your hired gun out. You say, evaluate a car, call me on the phone, tell me about it, and then I'll authorize my bidding up to whatever amount you tell me it's worth. So these aren't, a lot of this stuff is, it's for show, and it's to drum up a show for those middle ground cars, which, again, I say that's where Meekum and that's where Barrett-Jackson really make the money. So who is the circus act that is going to get people to come to your circus? And, again, there's enough people in that demographic in both Florida and Arizona. And there are probably some people that shuttle back and forth. I mean, I know that there are people who follow Meekum events from location to location just because they like the Meekum vibe. So, anything's possible. Auction culture really is its own thing. And to me, it's only kind of peripherally about cars. Like, all of these people could have easily latched onto paintings or something, but they didn't, because they're, blue collar Americans with healthy retirement that like cars and not paintings.
Well, some cars are art.
Oh, lots of them. Most of them, probably.
Well, I mean, some people treat them like art and or treat them like paintings, I guess. But paintings are, again, painted to be hung on a wall. Cars are built to be driven. So let's use your art the way it's intended to be used.
So now that that's over, I want to go back to what John said, and that Seinfeld's Porsche was just kind of one of the symbols to me, or the signs to me, that it was just merely show. I don't see where Seinfeld would honestly, truly sell that car. I mean, Steve McQueen's Porsche 917, it's one of the core cars in his collection, and it doesn't make sense that he would part with it. So to me, it really does kind of symbolize more of it was there for show more than anything else, especially at the fact that it didn't sell, even though it hit the 25 million. And like you said, John, even if he put the reserve at 27, 28, whatever, it's likely that Meekum would have sold it and paid the difference and, done all that they do. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not going to get people showing up. They're not going to get bidders. And to me, it's more appearance of, and I think we all know that in the Amelia Island and Moda Miami Concours situation, there was some kind of petty show off fighting going on there between Haggerty and RM. But I just, to me, and it's just this like, again, a bit of, to me, pettiness of like, oh well, we're gonna back it right up to it, like why, and not that they're, like you said, Dave, they can still have phone bidders, they can do all that, but to me, it's just also that like it's just a lack of courtesy in some ways. And again, it goes to the business world, right? You're trying to beat your competitors, you're trying to do things, and I don't understand it. I don't understand the approach of these big companies doing this against each other.
Well, and also remember that just like there's only so many weekends in the summer, if you're catering to people that live in a warm place during the winter for that environment, there's only so many weekends to cater to them as well. So the fact that these fall on consecutive weekends that way, you could consider a courtesy even more than you might think of it as a territorial match,
One thing I noticed about the Seinfeld 917, and I listen to a podcast where Seinfeld regularly appears and discusses cars, and he's actually talked for 2 years plus on that he's kind of done with his 917 and it needs to go on to new hands. So I believe he does have it marketed, maybe not seriously, but he does have it marketed a little bit. But what was odd, because I kind of knew, I'm a car guy. I'm a kind of a Seinfeld fan. I knew he owned the car. I knew he had the car. But there's also rumors that he sold the car a few years ago and it's not his car anymore. But people still think it's his car because it was sold not at public auction, but in a private sale. And if you look at the stuff Mecum did, nothing ever really mentioned Seinfeld coming out of Mecum. The press might have mentioned that it was, Seinfeld owned this 917, et cetera, but nobody said he was the current owner. And I would have thought if he was the current owner, you would have thrown that in with the Steve McQueen, because there is a Seinfeld value to a vehicle, it's in Le Mans, it's owned by Steve McQueen, it's owned by Seinfeld. You're not going to get a trifecta like that in a lot of cars. And of course, then it's a 917, et cetera. So it's just kind of a mystery sale to me. I'd like to know a lot more behind the scenes on that. If it really is still Seinfeld's car, if he really intended to sell it, all of that. But it's part of the fun of cars. I'm trying to find new things in cars, and I like conspiracy theories, and this car right now lends itself a little bit to conspiracy theories.
I mean, it would make sense if I had privately purchased it from him. I wouldn't want him to go around talking about it not being his, or to let people lose that connection with him, because it does form part of the provenance. It's also funny that Le Mans is part of the provenance, because if we're going to get around to talking about car movies, there's an example of how not to make a car movie, but how to make a really excellent sleep aid. I mean, just hours and hours of cars driving around in the dark, double shifting.
Well, that's most people's Sunday afternoon anymore, watching them drive in circles. Boom, 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 boom. I've kind of lost my passion for racing, but let's stick to talking about some car movies here. I know we've talked about car movies in the past, and we've talked, I think one of our earlier episodes when Dave joined us was car movies where the car was the star. But let's talk about some of the more famous car movies. I mean, you throw out Le Mans, and as stupid as it sounds, I always will say Cars is one of the best car movies ever made.
Oh, my kids, when I told them that our topic tonight one of our topics was what makes a good car movie. My youngest immediately said, "Oh, well, the cars have got to talk, and their eyes have got to be where the windshield is. Basically, it's got to be Cars 1 or 3." And then she went on to endorse planes. So you're welcome, Pixar.
I mean, it told a story. It lived history. I wish it would have caused a little bit more passion in that generation, because isn't that the generation now? I'm trying to think. Cars. That was about 20 years ago, right? Because I believe.
Man, that long.
It was surprising.
Yeah, I think so.
We can't have a new episode without, or we can't have an episode without. I think one of my ex-girlfriend's daughters, that was her first movie to see, and I believe that girl is now 21 years old. So that would put it right about that 20 year mark. And I mean, I like Cars 1. I can't really tell you much about Cars 2 or Planes other than the tapioca. Was it the tapioca pudding or the pistachio pudding in Cars 2? But
I don't remember that from Cars 2. I just remember that it being a spy movie with cars, which didn't.
Well, Mater goes to a buffet and he goes, "Ooh, pistachio pudding," and gets a whole bunch of it.
It's wasabi.
It's wasabi.
I remember that part now. Yep.
So if you'd like to know, June 9th, 2006 was the release date for Cars. So yes, we are 24 or 19 years. I can do math. 19 years of having the Cars movie out to the public.
Okay, that tracks, because it's a current film for all of my kids, who range from 17 down to almost 13. So that generation, I mean, it is a current reference for them. I mean, they understand Doc Hudson and Route 66. So, I don't know about how much passion it's kindled in kids, but it definitely has kept those things relevant as a cultural touchstone in a way that none of those things would have been without it, for anybody under the age of 50.
And I believe it was one of Newman's last movies.
Yes, it was.
Speaking of car movies and that, Newman had his fair share of him, James Garner, all of that little actor contingent race car driver car movies.
Garner is always the one who kind of flies under the radar for people, but he was really hardcore. I mean, he didn't he run Baja and a Rambler or something?
He ran Baja. I don't remember what he ran it in.
I mean, I think he probably ran it a couple times, but.
And I can't remember, was Newman who took Garner and got Garner into it, or if it was kind of vice versa, or if somehow.
I've heard, but I don't remember.
I can't remember the other guy I'm thinking. Robert Redford. It might have been something to do with Redford, but
isn't Redford considerably younger than those guys? I mean, like Newman was already acting in the 50s.
Well, Newman and Redford did The Sting together.
Right, and Butch Cassidy and Sundance. I mean, everybody pairs them together.
Yeah, so it's like Newman could have taken Redford, or Redford could have taken Newman, or something to a race. And of course, we all know Newman was as good of a racer as he was a actor, if not a better racer than he was an actor. Uh-huh. So Derek, throw out a car movie. I mean, I've got 3 or 4 on the tip of my tongue, but
I've thrown out a lot of car movies. A lot of them are trash.
that's
you're not wrong. I could definitely do an episode just on worst car movies.
Yeah, the
Hollywood
remake
Nights.
of Gone 60 Seconds.
Oh, dude, that's one of my favorites.
The remake?
Yes, the original's terrible. It's like, we have 112
The original is fantastic.
Let's record wrecking them. The original's not even
the original
a movie.
Is amazing. It is a full-on
documentary
Hollywood
of
movie
destruction
with a cult following.
Cult, yeah, because you got to be drinking some crazy Kool-Aid to think that that's good filmmaking. Do you like?
I cannot
Duel
believe
also?
you do not like the original.
Blacktop?
Two-Lane Blacktop's fantastic.
So he loves Two-Lane Blacktop. Dave needs to listen to some of our earlier movie show discussions.
What is wrong with Two Plane? I swear you and I
apparently-
watched Two Plane Blacktop when we were in college together.
I watched it with my wife when I was in law school and got banned from picking out movies at the movie store for a month or something
I
after
could have
that.
swore we watched it in one of the nights with the car club.
He might have fallen asleep.
No, I only fall asleep during Le Mans. I've tried to make my way through Le Mans like 3 times. Anyway, so we know that the qualification Derek has for a good car movie is absence of plot. So do go on. What other films do
And some of
you
them
enjoy?
absence of script.
Yeah.
But
Actually, hey, that's what makes it a car movie, because you hear the car. You don't hear a bunch of people's voices yapping about. You hear the car, which is the most important part of the movie.
Okay, so what makes a car movie? Question mark. Oh, disapproving cat. The movie was gone in 60 seconds.
Yeah, the original is way better. I will
Let
throw
me
one
go-
out, and we've mentioned it on the show before, and we'll see. I don't think Dave has been on when I've talked about it, but one of the greatest automotive history / in my opinion, car movies is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh, you like the streetcar conspiracy stuff.
Nope. Well, a little bit. A little bit.
Derek's just looking for somebody who's actually seen the whole movie, because I really never paid attention to the movie.
I've never seen it because it looked irritating to me.
You've never watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
I haven't. No, I don't like
What is
slapstick.
our friendship built on?
We had a history class together when we were freshmen.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So and we put up with each other because we don't let either one of us get away with anything. Yeah, no, okay. So plot-wise, I will say I think Roger Rabbit looks like a good film. I just couldn't get past the whole outrageous cartoonish. I didn't even like Warner Brothers cartoons growing up. I'm super square. I'm wearing a necktie. I mean, come on. So anyway, yes.
Super Square is the last thing that comes to mind with Roger Rabbit. There's a lot of figures going on there.
Oh,
yeah, no, Jessica's the opposite of square. I even know that part. Yeah.
But as we were talking, and we were talking two-lane blacktop, and we were talking Le Mans, a question popped into my head. We talked about cars, and that, Dave, you said your children's, that's the car movie kind of for your children's generation. And I talked about Mary Ryan, and that's kind of the car movie for her same generation. She's just a couple of years older than your children. What's the car movie for us? You know, me in my early 50s and, you know, being the 40s to 50s, because the two that pop right into my head are going to be Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run. Those are the car movies that got me car movies, but I'm modern mechanical or modern exotics and things like that. It was like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang yours, Derek?
Oh God, no. Actually, so I hate Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I do not care for Smokey and the
Flubber?
Bandit. The original Flubber? The original Flubber is fantastic.
The Absent-Minded Professor?
Yes.
Well, yeah, the Absent-Minded Professor.
It's one of my all-time favorite films, so yeah.
Oh, there it is. That's what we agreed on.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, because I love Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. It's Ian Fleming.
Yeah, I know, but it's just...
It has a story. You agreed with the child catcher. That's the problem.
But it's so cheesy.
So what are your guys's that you think are the car movies that of your generation that are sticking?
I don't know. Well, Fast and the Furious. The Fast and the Furious movies are the car movies of our generation, you know, and they're ongoing. But like my first date with my wife was to a second run movie theater to go see Fast and the Furious for the first time back in 2001. You know, like they're iconic. And yes, they're focused on tuner culture and they've become spy action thrillers, but at their core, they still retain this like basic love of just American car culture, which I think is the definition of a car movie, is one that's got cars at the center of it, either culturally or as a plot device, rather than just
I
as
don't
an
think I've
incidental
ever
that
made it
characters used to get around.
through. I don't think I've ever made it through the first Fast and the Furious.
The one from the 50s with the guy on the run.
I love
No,
that
actually,
one.
I haven't had a chance to watch that. But the new version that you're saying is from our generation. I can't watch them. They're, ugh, I can't do it.
Is it because you're carrying too much white bread suburbia cultural baggage into the films?
I grew up on a farm in the middle of Michigan.
Yeah, I stand by my statement. I've seen the cultural mores of rural Michigan.
Derek, you need to get on Amazon and buy the Fast and the Furious 1955. You will love it. The cars.
I know it exists. I need to watch it. Yeah, if I remember right, that was filmed at the Pebble Beach road races, wasn't it?
Yes, it's like the first or second Pebble Beach concours going on in the background of the movie, and it's. I mean, you might not like the Jaguar. That's the main topic of the movie, or the main car of the movie, but there's so much car history there.
I think I will, because isn't it an XK 120?
Yes.
It
will at 120,
I love
140.
XK 120.
Yeah, I
love that series. I would own one.
Does it have Brooklyn's windscreens on it?
I believe it does.
Oh, perfect.
No,
have you seen Johnny Dark? About the same era, Tony Curtis, but it's all early fiberglass home-built sports cars.
Glass bar. There's a glass bar in it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
We should have Jeffrey. We should have Jeffrey back on and talk about that movie.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah. Everything I know about that movie, I learned because of Jeff Hacker. Yes.
Yeah. He probably owns the whole contingent. We probably could get him together and do a remake. I think he got through the hurricane okay. He lost a lot of stuff, but
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
he lost a lot of it. Go ahead. No, he lost a lot of his print material in that. I think a lot of the cars made it, but I think he lost a lot of his archives.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The cars all survived. I just talked to Jeff yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, the cars are good, and but his house took a lot of damage, and some of the archives took some damage. But yeah, that could be fun. We could do a no driving gloves version of Johnny Dark.
I want the car that I want from the film that I know he doesn't have is one of the supercharged Willys Aero coupes that they used as I forget what the dummy name for the company is, but it's a stand-in for Willys. They use the factory and the Aero sedans as their bread and butter cars.
Yeah.
I think that whole film's available on YouTube if people want to watch it.
So anyway, I mean, going back to our generation, I mean, I kind of think Dave's right. Probably for most of our generation, the coming of age and movie would be the Fast and Furious, because I can't really think of any other car movies from our, really car-centric movies from our childhood or young adult years. It seems like car movies were kind of out of vogue during that period until the Fast and the Furious.
Well, could be, is it the 10-year difference between us? Or because I guess you guys would have been born about the time the movies that I said, Cannonball Run, Smokey and the Bandit.
Which means we grew up watching those on cable TV at late night. I mean, I can distinctly remember sitting through Cannonball Run a couple times with my dad, my grandparents, just hanging out.
And then you jump, and you're right. I'm sitting here thinking, what car movies for high school? And of course, I wasn't doing Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's a K-car convertible or whatever. I mean,
what's
we had
the
some
movie about
TV
the Gen
shows.
X? The Gen X stoners in high school that's got a bunch of cruising in cars in it, doesn't it?
Oh, Dazed and Confused.
Dazed and Confused.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen that movie, but I'm pretty sure that they spend a bunch of time cruising around cars, sort of American Graffiti style, which I think is another one of the greats, which doesn't have much of a plot. I mean, you know, Kurt and his buddy struggling with whether they want to go to college, and just sort of the existential crisis of being a youth in the early 60s as far as that goes.
Have either one of you seen Jason Hill's suggestion here, The Crowd Roars from 1932 with James Cagney? I have not seen that one.
I'd love to. The pre-code stuff is so hard to
know
find.
of it.
Clambake with Elvis Presley. I haven't heard of that one.
Saying a couple years, we might be able just to broadcast that on the podcast because it'll lose its copyright. It'll go into public domain in 1932.
Yeah. Actually,
is that the one where he crashes and they have to reset his hands so he can only grip the wheel? Or is that the one where he goes blind and they honk the horn in the corners? There's a couple of kind of corny ones from that era, but like just the cars alone would be fascinating. Oh, Tommy Boy, that's a good argument. Somebody mentioned my oldest road trip movies as being his theoretical favorite, and Tommy Boy's a road trip movie.
Well, Tommy Boy to me is going to be the same as what I said: planes, trains, and automobiles.
Basically, what about Joe Dirt in that case?
Yes. I mean, think about how central the Superbird is to Joe Dirt. I mean, that's definitely a movie that's got a car culture sensibility. I don't know that it's a full-on car movie, but it definitely gives heavy nods to it. Another one would be Family Vacation. Think about the family truckster. I mean, people clone that and take it to car shows. Yeah.
Right. Of course, I guess it's not a car movie, but I just saw it is a Trivial Pursuit Matchbox car. It's one of 7 in this series, but Wayne and Garth's Pacer from
Lord. Yeah.
I brought that up last week when we were talking about how Chevettes have gotten expensive, because I do think that there's a counterculture nerd moment going on here.
Well, we are. If you look at the people that were in front of the camera earlier this week, excluding the main guy, they're all nerds. Bezos, Zuckerberg.
Those guys.
You know, all these tech people, they're the in people. And I heard a good argument today that, you know, everything's being influenced by them. And it's no different than any other inauguration when trains were the thing. You know, you can bet everybody at the inauguration was, you know, owned railroads or steel companies and things like that. So throughout the years, it's just the industry that's in control. And right now, tech's in control of the world. So, yeah, I think, you know, your counterculture nerd thing, I think people are proud to be nerds again.
Yeah,
I was thinking it was more like bullied people become bullies. But somebody tell me about the race car from Clambake. Is that the John Athan Roadster?
Hang on. So, Dave, I need to clarify. Were you being serious that you don't know about Clambake?
No, I don't have a clue.
Okay, number one,
I don't think I've ever seen a single Elvis movie. Actually, I'd like to. I
guess I've never watched a full one all the way through. Clambake somehow, I'm not sure how this happened. I guess it happens regularly anymore. But Clambake, Elvis Presley the movie was permitted to use XP-87, the Stingray racer.
Oh, is that the mid-engined one?
No, that's the one that basically designed the look of the C2. That was Bill Mitchell's Stingray racer.
Oh, yes. Okay.
The silver, what is now, originally was silver. They painted it red for the movie for Clambake. It's now back to silver, obviously.
Was that roughly 58?
All due respect to Bill Mitchell.
Around 1958, 59.
Okay, that's why I know that car. It crashed into the Lotus 10 that I was restoring years ago.
It happens.
Was Elvis driving?
No, Mitchell was driving, and Bob Calmer, who owned the Lotus 10 at the time, he told me the story, and because of who Mitchell was, he just got a little slap on the wrist because it was an illegal move he did, and it took out the rear corner of the Lotus 10. Of course, they had to be repaired during the restoration, but Rubbin's racing, isn't it?
Something like that.
Some mustached man said that 30 years ago.
So anyway, Dave, yeah, you need to. I mean, I've watched clips of clam bake. I've never watched the whole thing, but yeah, that was XP87, baby. Yeah,
That'd probably be something dangerous to Google. I don't know if I'd recommend Googling that on your work computer.
clam bake.
XP87 or clam bake?
Clam bake.
I've always
I mean,
wanted to
just make
attend
sure you
a
put
clam
Elvis Presley after it.
I mean, I'm in New England. I think clam bake's a pretty normal thing to Google here.
Well, yeah, good point.
Go out to Cape Cod. Yeah. I'm still waiting for my invite.
So, if we were well, there are two things I want to say here, which is I'm going to be very sarcastic in saying that, and I believe I am correct in this, but the very first car movie was called The First Auto, 1927. And it's very interesting. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube. Obviously, it's it's in public domain. But it's just kind of a quirky little silent film, and some interesting things go on in it. And it's kind of just a good laugh to watch early film, early cars driving around, and the way they portrayed early automobiles in that movie is quite hilarious.
Isn't that one of the ones that uses a buggy aught like yours?
Yeah, actually, the buggy yacht does show up in that for a short, like not quite 2 second clip, and I actually believe that it may actually be the car I own that is in the movie.
Oh, that's cool. And it's standing in for an earlier one?
No, the film was done in 1927. They were just showing cars of the early days of the automobile.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
The speaking of early car films, I just watched Hot Water by Harold Lloyd the other day. That one's from 1924, and in it, he takes delivery of a new car, and it's a 23 Chevy touring car, but it's all disguised up to look like what they're calling a Butterfly 6. And they then proceed to drive it around town, and it goes through a series of mishaps and ends up getting utterly destroyed, and he gets 2 traffic citations. And that's really only like the first 2/3 of the film, and then the third is about disagreements with his mother-in-law arising from this ill-fated car trip. But oh my god, not only is it hilarious, which you wouldn't think a silent film could make you bust a gut, but for real, those guys are hilarious even 100 years later, even if you don't know or care anything about the 1920s, because culturally not that much has changed. So but the car plays such a central role in that one. And cars, you can see the psychological importance of a car to the middle class strivers of the 1920s, because that's the glasses character in the Harold Lloyd films, and the way like the car is starting to pervade urban culture and things, and how it's clearly making people uncomfortable who don't really understand. Like when he first gets it, he keeps turning around to talk to people in the back seat. Like that was a thing people who were only used to horses would do, because all you have to do is hold the reins and you could talk to people in the back seat. The horse would do all the work. Nowadays, right. Well, we're going back to a model where that is the case, where you can turn around and talk to people in the back seat. But for the intervening 100 years, you couldn't take your eyes off the road, or you were liable to drive off it as well.
Exactly. So I did think of something though about our childhood, and I think it'll fit for all three of us. And I think maybe if we step out of only talking about movies and we switch over to TV shows as well,
Is this about
I
Knight
think
Rider?
there were a number of TV shows that left vehicular impressions on our minds. And the first one that popped into my mind, actually, I should say the first two that popped into my mind are Walker Texas Ranger with the Dodge Ram truck and Nash Bridges with the 71 CUDA convertible.
Definitely Nash Bridges. I forgot about the truck and Walker.
Yeah, I mean that show is the reason I wanted a Dodge Ram of that generation, the 94 and a half up series Ram with the the drop fenders and that killer truck.
Here's a question. Could the Back to the Future movies, at least the first two, be considered car movies on some level? Because cars play an important role throughout them. I mean, the DeLorean is the time machine. The cars are emblematic. I mean, it starts out with a Statler Brothers Toyota ad in the 80s, and then they later show you the Statler Brothers Studebaker dealership in the 50s for that continuity. A lot of the action occurs in or around cars between, Biff and the skateboard chase of the manure truck and all of that. I mean, because I got to say, like, that caused me, I think, to really fall in love with the details of a lot of those cars, because you get to see, like, the dashboard of Doc's Packard and the pedals on Biff's convertible and that sort of thing. Like those Back to the Future movies, and then the modern, the 2015 version, which is hilarious because that's now a decade in the past. But I mean, they used a bunch of like Detroit concepts and weird kit cars and stuff to show the cars of the future too. So I mean, they've got it at both ends, like extreme futurism and personal transportation, right down to the flying car, and then all those 50s cars.
Those 1886 trains.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be, and funny enough, like, I guess at least in our generation that was so tied to those films, I think more so than the DeLorean. Lately, I have heard more talk about the Toyota truck.
Oh yeah,
that's in the movie, more so than the DeLorean. I mean, it seems like everyone I know is more kind of obsessed about the truck that was in that movie than the DeLorean. So, I mean, I think it did have an impact.
Well, who doesn't want to throw a sleeping bag in the back, take it up to the lake, spend the weekend up there with Jennifer? I mean, that's just...
I think somebody wrote a song about that. The 6-foot bed doesn't have to be made.
Ah, yes. There's something women like about a pickup man. I definitely remember my 90s country music.
According to Gemini, yes, Back to the Future is considered a car movie because the central plot revolves around a time-traveling DeLorean car, which is a key element of the story and used to travel through time throughout the film series, making the car a defining feature of the movie. So Google's AI says yes.
Great. Thank you, Google. All right. Who would win in a fight? Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or Kit?
Oh, I didn't even think about Knight Rider.
Oh, you didn't think about Knight Rider?
I've been looking. I do a lot of audits in Walmarts, and Knight Rider is now one of the kind of featured DVD series, and it's like $29. You can get every episode of Knight Rider, or every episode of Dukes of Hazzard, which granted it's a season or two longer, is like $60. Knight Rider. Kit,
Dukes of Hazzard.
Truck.
Another, I mean, car-centric, cultural, not film, but moving picture. Yeah.
Yeah, Dukes of Hazzard would be really boring without the cars.
What is the appeal of Dukes of Hazzard? Is it the jumps? I mean, I think it's the extended car chases all the time.
It's the eluding of the law. The some folks won't get it, but what the bad boys always win, or something like that, or I don't know.
Well, and moonshine is one of those like victimless. I mean, moonshine is essentially tax evasion. Like, people don't really have a lot of sympathy for the G-men when it comes to illegal alcohol.
They don't have a lot of sympathy. I can never say that word. They don't feel bad for any sort of government oversight and control. So, I mean, that's why see, there's Dave chugging on his moonshine.
Yeah.
That's why moonshiners is so popular now. No cars involved, but yeah, I mean, I think it's the bad guys getting away from the good guys, and maybe the moonshine, but they don't ever really focus on the shine. I mean, yeah, Uncle Jesse used to do that, but we watched it for Daisy, we watched it for the General Lee, and I don't know.
Who are you calling the bad guys? Who are you calling the bad guys in the Dukes of Hazzard?
For the lawbreakers, it sounds like, and then Boss Hogg and such would be the good guys because they represent authority in the government.
You can go either way. I mean, that's who's the good guys and bad guys in The Godfather.
Well, but I'm just saying, because we know Bo and Luke are just some good old boys. Never mean no harm.
Well, yeah. Intent. I mean, some of these crimes don't have an intent portion to them. They're just crimes. So,
well, they elude the law. They run from the police. It doesn't matter if they're crooked police.
That's also a crime. Yeah.
So Jason
brought up go to jail and have your day in court. The only
thing OJ was guilty of is running from the police. He didn't do anything else.
Yeah. Hey, if the glove doesn't fit.
I just saw 79 Broncos sell for $110,000 at Barrett Jackson earlier this evening.
Wow.
So Jason just threw out. Yeah, Jason just threw out Batman, Magnum PI, and Starsky and Hutch.
Well, you got to give Starsky and Hutch because they did a remake of their car, and they did a remake of the movie. They did a remake of Magnum PI, which I'm really mad they didn't get the fifth season that they were contracted for. And there's a Batmobile at Barrett Jackson on Saturday if you're interested. Car number 3. That lineup
makes me think, what about that other Don Johnson vehicle, Miami Vice? I mean,
Miami Vice?
Oh. Yeah, well, the Ferrari was a big deal in that, so much so that they replaced the kit car after the first season, right?
Second season, but...
Okay.
For that matter, Don Johnson, Nash Bridges. Do you think Nash Bridges had anything to do with the rise in Hemi Cuda values?
Yeah, they were almost simultaneous.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Nash Bridges had a little bit to do with that. Yes, they were rare cars, blah, 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 but it's, I remember Nash Bridges for his yellow Cuda convertible with the white interior.
I always thought that the big deal about Hemi cars too was that they were so documentable. Like, you can't document Chevrolets the way you can a Hemi Cuda because Chevrolet was just too big and didn't keep the records. But the Plymouth organization was small enough that they held on. So when you go to auction, you can be like, here's my 3-ring binder full of proof that this is a rare and special car. And then you go to the Chevy and you go, well, when they did it, this is exactly how they did it. But because the serial number could be the same as if this car came with a 307, you just have to take my word for it that it started life as an SS396.
I think the desire for Mopars, muscle Mopars like that, was more you had to have money to restore them in that, because unlike a Camaro, unlike a Mustang, unlike a GTO, there was not a Mopar catalog that you could just order fenders and quarter panels and entire cars from it. Up, 20, 25 years ago, 25 years ago, Mopars were harder to restore. And I also believe they rusted quicker. So they were
not good to begin with. I mean, they were assembled like taxi cabs back in the day. People didn't buy Chrysler products for quality in the 60s.
But, so I think it was the exclusivity of them that helped add to their value and the desire to have them. And, well, I can't afford to restore a Charger, so I'll restore a Mustang or the thought process like that. But lately, to me, they're all about the same. When you go, if I go through the auction numbers here, they're all $100,000, $150,000 cars for run of the mill. Obviously, you have your special editions and your Hemis and your Shelbys and your Yankos. But I think we've reached a point of equilibrium that all of them are about the same values. But I think 20, 25 years ago, there was always a little panache about having a restored Mopar. And I think Mopar guys still have a little bit of that in their mind, is that hey, we're a little bit better than you, which is not true. I like Mopars, but I hate Stellantis. There's not a chance you'd catch me in most modern Stellantis vehicles. So,
oh hell, I'd love a 1926 Chrysler 70 Series Roadster. Oh man, it's like a poor man's Bentley right there.
Yeah, but that's not a Stellantis vehicle.
I don't want a Pacifica, which is I think the only Chrysler anymore, right? Or no, they did introduce some other nameplates, I think, but still, I mean, I don't know. There's nothing compelling coming out of any new car manufacturer these days. Not to me.
No.
That's why I haven't bought a car in 2 years. And the stuff I'm even thinking about buying is at least 2 or 3 years old.
I mean, Dave, on that point, a 1931 Chrysler CM6 is a fantastic car.
Well, I would love your car, but you would not like the offer that I could make you, which would be like a nail and a shell and a great grandfather snail and some cardboard boxes and an AM broadcaster.
Well, while you're on the subject of your 26 Chrysler and your 31 Chrysler and where you're at, Dave, because of the New Hampshire law that I guess is proposed, would you put seatbelts in them?
No.
Okay. So I like seatbelts from a functional standpoint. Now, in a vintage vehicle, I don't have many illusions as to just how much a seatbelt is going to save me from in the event of an accident. The most important thing you can do is just not freaking crash the car. But I do like that they hold me in during, sharp maneuvers or whatever. But I do not like the idea that New Hampshire is proposing, and I think this has got to be just one or two crackpots in their legislature and not a whole movement, but they're proposing to limit the use of non-seatbelt retrofit vehicles on New Hampshire public roads for more than 20 miles. And I don't know if that's per year or period for the rest of their existence or per trip.
No, just
or what?
Per trip. It's per trip. Yeah, if you can only drive it less than 20 miles when you take it out.
So if I get out and stretch and then get back in, I can go another 20 miles?
If I go to McDonald's.
Yeah. And then their definition of a seatbelt was frightening because it refers directly to the Code of Federal Regulations on how a new safety belt system works, which you couldn't possibly retrofit something like that into a pre-1968 vehicle. I mean, you could put in 1967 style seatbelts into your 1967 vehicle, but they wouldn't fit with the modern CFRs because those modern CFRs have to be designed into a vehicle. So it's ludicrous. And it's from the live free or die state, it's hypocrisy, especially when I still don't think they have a motorcycle helmet law. So like, let's go after something that's a real issue and not fall directly into everyone's definition of a nanny state.
You see, when I restored cars for the general public working for a shop, I refused to retrofit seatbelts.
Because you're taking on the liability then.
Yeah,
I installed my own. Yeah.
I always feel it's too much of a liability for me personally. And of course, the shop's going to blame me if the shop gets sued, etc. So the two cars I was asked to put them in, I refused to put them in. We didn't put them in. And it's up to the owner to either do it or find somebody to do it. Because I referred to him earlier, the bushy mustached guy, that rubbing his racing. Part of the attribution of him dying was his seatbelt was positioned 3 inches incorrectly to the angle. And to hold, securely hold him. Yeah, it's a basilar skull fracture, has nothing to do with where his lap belt was, but they still say that was part of the problem. So I always avoided doing it. And then who's to say, okay, you figured out a way to put the seat belts in your 1926 Chrysler and keep them modern. Okay, now you need to put airbags in it. Where do we stop? It's one of those things. You need to put a seatbelt on your motorcycle, but you don't have to wear a helmet.
Because remaining strapped to the motorcycle in a crash is a good thing.
Well,
that's exactly.
It's only fair.
But and that's exactly the problem with this idea of this new law is, I'm sorry, but most early cars, you don't want to stay strapped with them. You want to be able to either bail out or be thrown from the vehicle, because you're less likely to get killed or severely injured, because especially early cars, they're typically bodies with a little bit of metal, tacked over them. So when they get in a crash, there's metal coming apart, there's slivers of wood flying through the air. You want to be as far away from that as possible. Yeah. Are you going to hit the ground pretty hard? Probably. But is that a little better than, taking a piece of ash that snapped off in the body through your chest? I think it is. I'd rather take my chances leaving the car than staying with it.
With this new rule, what they're ensuring, as the seatbelts rip out of your wood-framed car,
yeah, exactly,
you're going to take some of that wood with you, so you're increasing the chances you can get hit by that wood.
Yeah. Or if you're smart enough to take it and attach it to the metal framework of the chassis, then the body just rips off around you as it's rolling through the air. Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a very graphic story about a car crash that happened in Pownell here in Vermont in the early days, and it's well known because it was a prominent citizen of one of the Massachusetts towns just south of the border, who was out with his chauffeur driving their new Pierce Arrow. This was like 1911, something like that, and it was this man and his daughter, and the car rolled over, and the father and the chauffeur were thrown clear, and she stayed in the seat, and the car rolled right over her, because in a 1911 Pierce, there's nothing to protect you when that car rolls over. So, and she was pretty horribly crushed and took like hours to die. And then the father died like a week later, they said, from grief. And then the chauffeur, who was uninjured, shot himself with a horse pistol a month after that because he blamed himself for everything. And what had happened is they'd gone off the road to drive around a cart that was parked on the side. And when the far wheels dropped off, I think that era of Pierce is still right-hand drive. So when the left-hand wheels dropped off the side of the road that he couldn't see, the car just rolled down the hill. But I think it kind of graphically demonstrates exactly what you're talking about, which is, in a modern car that hits a bridge abutment going 70, you don't want to be thrown free. Staying in the vehicle is what's important. So the crash, the crumple zones can work, and the airbags can do their work, and the seatbelt can do its work. But simply tacking even a 3-point or a 5-point harness into an early car is going to do more harm than good. And I think it really is what this really is just another attempt to say, well, we tried to give you historic plates that limit your ability to use these cars, and you insist on driving them still. So we're going to do something else to limit the number of miles that you can put on them, and putting a ridiculous low mileage limit on it, unless it's in a parade, is one way to just keep it's no coincidence, I'm sure, that the first federal pollution controls also start showing up in the 1968 model year. So the collateral effect is to get a lot of the pre-pollution vehicles off the road in a permanent way. But, with as strong a tourist culture and a car culture as New Hampshire has, it's shocking to me that this is out there. And hopefully this is one of those things where we all heard about it because we are informed car people on the internet and hear about stuff like this. But otherwise, it's probably just going to be a little bit of crazy in their state house and then go away. But if you live in New Hampshire and you're listening to this show, please get a hold of your legislature and tell them to stop this.
Yeah.
'Cause this
Otherwise,
kind of thing spreads.
well, like you said,
Yeah.
is it could be something that nobody's heard about and it's going to slip through. You know, somebody's come up with this bill for some reason. And if politics has taught me anything in 50 years on this planet, somebody's getting paid for something. So if they can slip it through, they'll slip it through for some reason.
It's big seatbelt, man. It's big seatbelt. They're coming for us.
Big seatbelt.
Probably getting them damn old cars off the road. You don't need those things.
Well,
So-
I'm going to keep mine. I know that.
Yeah. I think we've bitched about a few things tonight. Talked about a few things.
We didn't even get to what the most important American race car has been. So I guess we have to talk about that next week.
Well, I bumped it off. I
right.
can't guarantee you we're going to have a show next week. I can't guarantee you it's going to be on Thursday next week. One of us
That's
has a
true.
conflict. We might do it on a different day. It might be just two of us. We'll see where we go. Right now, the topic is Derek not available to record. No, we're really not doing we're not doing topics.
You guys have a good time talking about that.
Yeah. Well,
A whole
Derek,
hour of just talking about how you're not around to record.
I was looking at Derek's mic settings and everything. It might actually be good that he's not around to record, but we'll see.
Is
We
my
might
mic
not
going
be
crazy tonight.
Like I said, part of the new 2025 No Driving Gloves is we're doing this for fun. We want you, the listeners, if you want to be on a show, you have a topic, you want to discuss something, you want to bitch about something, it's No Driving Gloves. Literally a gloves-off approach to the old car hobby. 3-4 guys sitting around talking cars. You know, pull up Mountain Dew, pull up a Jack and Coke. I don't care. Just sit down with us.
Jug of Shine.
But yeah, I mean, you see it all on the show, as we so proudly. It's even got a tax stamp on it from Canada. So is there anything else we want to touch on or cover or bitch about, or do we all want to?
Thanks everybody for joining us.
So we could talk to you next week. We might be a week off, but the idea is to keep it light and keep it fun. And if one of you listeners out there want to join in, email me at producer@nodrivinggloves.com or nodrivinggloves@gmail.com. Shoot me a note. Maybe we'll have you on next week and you can be the third. You can be the Derek next week. Or maybe you could be the John. I don't know. Everybody wants a John. We talked about that before the show.
Oh, I'll be the Derek next week.
You could be the Derek next week. And then somebody could be the Dave.
Academic integrity.
You can't. You have terrible choices in movies.
I can, no, but I'll pretend.
Maybe we'll do that.
Dear boy.
And maybe we'll all assume different roles in a few weeks. That's it then, guys. For me, I'm going to say, get off your ass, go burn some gas. Because John is out. I always give these guys a chance to say bye, but they don't. Blow you a kiss.
Bye.